Again, you run into a problem where there's a certain amount going to illegal immigrants, and you have a certain amount.
A rural town hall turned into a disaster for this MAGA Republican representative. This is actually Doug Lamalfa's first town hall in 8 years, and I'm sure it'll be his last. I compiled the best moments for you guys here, but if you want to check out where we break down his lies, I put some timestamps down below. And while you're down there, go ahead and subscribe to Really American. All right, let's jump in.
But there's also people involved in the way those files, at some level, need to be redacted. So, in those files, also the innocent names are in there too. So you need to be careful with how the names and some of the information that would lead back to victims are put out there. So a little diligence is good. You know, the wheels of legislation and justice don't always move as fast as you'd like. But hopefully in September we can get back and we will demand eventually that this information gets out. Properly handled, protect the innocent victims and their information, okay?
Now, if you just listened to the mainstream media, which I would not recommend, you'd think that people were starting to move on from this Epstein saga. That's what Harry Enton is saying over on CNN just yesterday. And their evidence for this claim is that people aren't Googling Epstein anymore, and it's not people's #1 issue, which doesn't necessarily mean people don't care, as evidenced from the town hall you just watched.
I would say that this is, from at least a political point of view, quickly turning into a dud of a story. What am I talking about here?
Which is wild.
Which is wild.
This has been for 3 weeks.
Exactly. Now. Take a look here. Google searches for Epstein down 89% versus just 3 weeks ago, falling through the floor. It is no longer the top term searched alongside Donald Trump's name. That's been trading off between Taros and Vladimir Putin, with obviously the meeting coming up later this week. But at this particular point, the American people's interest in this story, it's quickly becoming something of a nothing burger.
This is such disappointingly inaccurate analysis from CNN here. I don't think anybody would have ever said that Epstein is the #1 issue in America right now, ever, at any point. And just because people aren't Googling Epstein Trump anymore the way they were 3 weeks ago, doesn't mean that the whole country just wants to move on the way Donald Trump wants us to. Sounds like somebody at CNN is hitting the red button on this one. I mean, I think this town hall proves that people do in fact care, and despite folks wanting to move on for various nonsensical reasons, I don't think the president being involved in the biggest child predator ring in history should be something that we voluntarily move on from. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the #1 issue. It doesn't have to be. I think there are more important issues, like Medicaid, for example, where millions of people are looking down the barrel of being uninsured.
On the Medicaid portion of the bill, nobody's cutting anybody that is a true needful person. No one's being kicked off for being low income or needing it. If you qualify for Medicaid, you will get it. Protects the coverage for seniors, people with disabilities, low income children, and adults.
Let him speak!
So what we're doing is
let him speak!
How it administers its end of the Medicaid/Medi-Cal program. When you have the Newsom administration targeting $12 to $12.5 billion for illegal immigrants. $12 to $12.5 billion. Why should the federal government keep pouring money into the state to spend illegally? Because there's a federal nexus. The federal nexus is the federal money that goes into that fund are directed towards illegal immigrants. And I think taxpayers work too hard to have their money go to illegal immigration. Okay? So the state of California has a responsibility and a role in helping the Medicaid program, Medi-Cal programs run as efficiently as possible. So there is fraud, there is waste in it. Again, you run into a problem where there's a certain amount going to illegal immigrants, and you have a certain succeed by cracking down on the fraud in the program and still having the people that have eligibility gain the benefit. That sounds like a win-win to me.
The Republican claim that millions of illegals are going to be kicked off of Medicaid, and that's where the savings are going to come from, is just absolutely ridiculous. Undocumented immigrants are not on federal Medicaid. That is not a thing that exists. Any undocumented immigrants who do lose their coverage are going to lose it because of the state program being dried up, or because their family members who are citizens are going to lose their coverage. What Trump's final bill did do, however, is implement a new 80-hour work requirement that will come with a slew of paperwork to be done every week, I'm sure. That alone will stop millions of people from having regular coverage, as any kind of additional hurdle leads to fewer applicants. And on top of that, the bill does not exempt older Americans from the work requirements, meaning that older folks who might be on Medicaid are going to have to get jobs, or more likely, lose their coverage. And these work requirements are the source for all of the quote-unquote savings that Trump is bragging about. The CBO says that of the Medicaid provisions included in the enacted reconciliation package, CBO estimates implementing work requirements will account for the largest share of federal Medicaid savings. Earlier CBO estimates also found work requirements will cause the largest increase in the number of people without health insurance. Clearly, this is going to be a massive loss in healthcare coverage come 2026 when these work requirements hit the books. I think the Republicans are overestimating the general American racism towards Hispanics and immigrants and aren't going to be willing to lose their healthcare because of illegals. Insurance of all kinds are becoming more and more expensive. Health insurance because of Trump's policies, and home insurance because of climate change.
Please tell us what your information is that makes you believe that climate change is a hoax. Well, that's actually a little bit off. The climate does change. It changes often. And so what this really boils down to is that there's folks that want it to be blamed on human activity for how much the climate might shift. The climate shifts drastically compared towards what human activity is. And if you want to talk just carbon dioxide from all which seems to be listed under the Obama administration back in 2009 as the engagement clause, just arbitrarily, CO2 is the enemy, right? So, carbon is a basic building block of life on Earth. Every living creature needs it in some fashion.
Let him talk!
All plant life relies on CO2. You see, greenhouses have extra CO2 pumped into them to make the plants grow faster. And so you have a situation where somebody has decided that CO2 could be the enemy, and they've been leveraging that in order to tax people, to control people, and do silly things like the California high-speed rail system, for example, that is 20 years behind and 4 times over budget. So,
Evidence!
CO2
It is! What evidence do you want? It is.
Insane to me that Republicans are still running with the climate change isn't real narrative 24 years after Al Gore made the inconvenient truth. I guess even Gore didn't know how inconvenient the truth truly was, because climate change is undoubtedly the cause of these increasingly extreme weather disasters. And while the government refuses to accept reality, the insurance companies sure are aware of it. State Farm is raising home insurance rates for people in Illinois due to climate change increasing the severity of hailstorms. In Florida, increased hurricane risks lead to flooding and wind damage, which causes home insurance to get harder and harder to get. And then, of course, in California, where Lamalfa's district is, they're facing the same crisis of home insurance rates skyrocketing due to, in their case, wildfire risks, which are getting worse because of climate change. And at this point, most people have moved past whether or not climate change is real and are now starting to consider the question, what are we going to do about it? According to this data from Pew Research Center, even a majority of Republicans say that natural disasters are linked to climate change, either a little or a lot. For whatever reason, severe weather like floods and intense storms have the least amount of connections polling for both Democrats and Republicans as far as their connection to climate change. But even for Republicans, it's over 50%. Only 37% say that they're not connected at all. Now, of course, Republicans are greatly lagging behind Democrats on the issue, who at most only have 4% saying that climate change isn't connected to these climate disasters. But clearly, the MAGA Republican messaging here from Lamalfa is way off base. At best, a third of Republicans believe climate change is unlinked completely from natural disasters. Hail damage, fire damage, flood damage, it ruins all of our lives the same, regardless of our political opinions. And at a certain point, you can't deny that the sky is falling. If you guys want to stay informed on this kind of coverage that MAGA hates to hear, well, then you know where to find it, right here at Really American. So be sure to subscribe. I'm Tony Hinderman, and I'll catch you next time.